Welcome one, welcome all, welcome to Recorded Neutral Territory. I'm Brian O'Reilly? That feels weird to say. And Adam Russo is joining us in the normally vacant producer's chair because he's dialing in from a beachside vacation this week. Adam is waving, folks. He misses you already. But fear not, you don't just have to listen to me prattle on for 2 hours because this is a very special episode of RNT. It's the first in our new reader reaction series, where we interrogate one or two new readers foolish enough to appear on this program. Before I break my promise about prattling, let me introduce those readers. So our first apprentice prepping for White Council admission is Charlotte. Joining us from St. Louis, Charlotte and I have been friends for almost 20 years now, God. She's a brilliant lady, married to a total badass with a beautiful new baby, and more importantly for our purposes, an extremely astute reader with an awesome breadth of literary experience under her belt, including a fair amount of fantasy titles. I can't thank her enough for joining us with her intelligence and insights. Charlotte, how's the baby? How's your husband? How are you?
Baby and husband are doing great. Hopefully you don't hear the baby in the background. She should be going to sleep momentarily. I don't know if I'm going to be able to live up to that introduction, Brian. That is very flattering. But yes, we have known each other for 20 years now. But yes, I do have a fair amount of experience reading fantasy, a lot of Stephen King as well. That's recently what I've been picking up on. Brian and I have also played Dungeons and Dragons together on a couple of occasions. So that's what I'm bringing to the table and excited to be here.
Yeah, Charlotte's TTRPG experience is not to be overlooked, folks. And that's wonderful to hear. And thank you again for being with us. And then last, but certainly not least, I am least in this scenario, folks, is Patrick, joining us from Queens, New York, about 20 minutes away from me. Patrick is my brother, so I've known him for a little while, too. He's also brilliant, and his partner is a very lucky girl for nabbing the most dedicated cat dad I know. Patrick's here because I literally cannot think of anyone more qualified to talk about fantasy literature and world building. Not only is he a voracious consumer of all types of fiction, he knows the fantasy genre as a whole extremely well. TTRPGs, fantasy gaming, basically anything where you've got magic making trouble for your verisimilitude. Pat, how's your trip to Pennsylvania? How's your partner? How's the cats?
Hey, Brian. We're good. We're good. The cats got to experience, one of them's first road trip, and they handled it pretty okay. And we got back to having a power outage and a tanked fridge, which I spent this afternoon fixing, which has been great. But it's working again. So my drinks are cold, and I'm happy to be here talking about the fantastic book series you've put me on.
You know, in my script, it says that's wonderful, but the fridge thing sounds really gross, actually.
It was unfortunate to come home to, but it's fine now.
So, you guys were provided with these questions beforehand, and the first thing we asked you was to compare Stormfront to other books you've enjoyed, like give it a 1 to 5 star rating among your favorite books, just overall thoughts, how good of a book is Stormfront? Pat, putting you on the spot first.
Comparing it to other books I've enjoyed, so I've read a lot of fantasy growing up, like Charles mentioned before, and you as well. I've read a lot of Stephen King. The Dark Tower series was very formative for me growing up. David Eddings was very formative for me growing up as well. And recently, a lot of Warhammer Fantasy, Warhammer 40K. On a scale of 1 to 5, I'd put it at probably a 3.5 to a 4. I found it very fun. You know, it's very much an homage to like a detective genre, to that mystery genre, and a wonderful blend of fantasy. So I really enjoyed it. It does make me want to read more, but it definitely has a bit of a first time writer stigma attached to it.
Yeah, so it for you, it felt really like a first novel, but 3.5 to 4 stars, pretty strong first novel.
Yeah, I'd say I'm a sucker for the genre, which may be coloring my rating. I do love a good mystery story. I love good fantasy elements. You know, if I was going to be a lot more critical, I might bump that rating down. But as of right now, I think 3.5. It made me want to read more. I had a good time. It didn't overstay its welcome.
Charlotte, how about you?
So I'm wary of grade inflation. So I would, I think, give it a solid 3, which means that I did very much enjoy the book. I've been reading a lot of nonfiction lately, and so it was fun to step away from reading things about Enron and finance and get into a mystery novel about a crazy wizard. Like Patrick, I am also a sucker for genre. I'm a huge sucker for mystery genre. So the fact that it was a noir like this was really, I found delightful. I am excited to read more. I did enjoy it enough that I think I want to learn more about this world and these characters. I could see it being almost a monster of the week type of storytelling, except that I've been told that there's apparently a lot more lore and a broader universe that comes into it. So that intrigues me.
Yes, I did have to confess to our new readers that there were actually 17 books in the series, folks, before I roped them in. So I'm sorry for spoiling that much for them. But to be fair, they could just Google it. So, yeah, that sounds like a fairly positive review. Now, most people will tell you, Charlotte, that, Stormfront is actually one of the weaker books in the series. As it goes on, in general, it gets better. So when you say that you're looking forward to reading more, are we at like a, oh my God, that sounds amazing, can't wait to start 5? Or are we at more of a like, yeah, I mean, I might need to take some time before I pick up the next one?
I actually am at a 5. I'm excited to keep reading this. I'll say it's very easy reading. It's fun to read. It's zippy. And so I'm not looking at it like, oh my gosh, I have another novel I have to slog through if I want to keep being on this super fun podcast. I genuinely am looking forward to reading more of it. And I will say the idea that it improves, I'm glad to hear it's the writing. I agree with Patrick was a little bit clunky in some spots. So I could see that if that skill improves, but the universe kind of stays the way that it is, then I think I'm in for a treat.
Yeah, I do think that you're actually touching on something that's very interesting there, where it's an easy read, even though at parts the writing isn't, what you would pray for in the best kind of fantasy fiction work you could imagine. I do think that it's a strange combination of attributes, but I do think that that is true of Stormfront. Pat, how about you? Where are you on the seeing, how soon do you want to read the next one?
Kind of flipping mine and Charlotte's scores from before, where she's at a 5 now. I'm probably about a 4. And again, that's not a mark against the series. That's not a mark against, the writing. I am excited to read more, but it was one of those things that I read and I was like, that's really good. And I have a lot of questions about certain areas of the book and I am curious. But then once I had put it down and like had time to think about it, I'm like, I want more, but I'm not, depending on how the writing goes, I'm not super hungry for it yet.
Right. Okay. Yeah. A little bit more of a wait and see. That makes sense. So are there any books that you've read recently or just ever that you think are a cool comparison for Stormfront?
Yes. So what kept coming up for me is the movie Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which is also one of my favorite movies of all time. Because while that is a noir with Robert Downey Jr., this is essentially a noir with a wizard. And it seemed like that was kind of the attitude or tone that this was trying to capture as well. A little bit zany, a little bit clever. I don't know if all of the jokes necessarily landed, but that was what I kept coming back to. And especially there's something that his character says that they literally read these mystery novels in that movie. And one of the things he says that he loves is that it's 2 cases at the beginning. And then by the end, it turns out that they're the same case. Well, that's exactly what happens in this. And so I love that trope personally. I think that's always fun to see when you have 2 cases introduced. Well, obviously, these are going to intersect. So how is that going to work? So I thought it was executed well here. And that was kind of sticking with me throughout reading it.
Yeah. Now all I can think of is Dresden saying, when his landlord asks him for the bills, I'll get you the residuals soon. I invented dice as a kid. They're coming. Yeah, I think that's actually a fair comparison because that is very modern noir feel, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, similar to like Lucky Number 11. I think both of those have kind of the comic sensibility that's been modernized in a way similar to Stormfront, but they also are all 3 homages to literally pulp fiction. So we're going to get into, I think, the slightly more detail-oriented questions here about the book specifically. So we're going to stay a little broad at first. But Charlotte, when it comes to the plot of Stormfront, we were just talking about how it's two cases in the beginning, they come together at the end. Does it actually work as a mystery for you? Did you enjoy the twists, the setup, the payoff, or do you feel like that part of it didn't land as well?
I'm always trying to get ahead of a mystery writer when I read a mystery. And this one, I actually was not doing that because I was engrossed in actually just what Harry was doing and where he was going. So the plot really worked for me from that sense in he's he's doing so much weird stuff that you almost the mystery is kind of the background to that a little bit of just him showing off his methodology, all of these different characters. So in that sense, I don't know if the mystery works under very strict scrutiny, but for me it did. I enjoyed the payoff at the end that it was Victor. I wasn't ahead of that as I probably could have been, but at the same time I like that it wasn't out of nowhere because that is also a huge pet peeve of mine for a mystery where, oh, well, it was actually this other side character, and that's because of this whole other thing that was going on that we never alluded to in this entire book that you just spent 200 pages reading. That I cannot stand. And this one, I do think that the stage was set for where it to be the third eye and what was going on with Monica and everything. So I think it coalesced nicely in the ending.
I'm really happy to hear you say that because that was actually something that we discussed in one of our early episodes, that the fact that it's not an ass pull, that it doesn't come out of nowhere, is a credit to the book, even if you can on a reread sort of see it coming, especially. But that's really interesting that you felt like the fantasy elements actually helped cover the mystery elements. I think that's that's very true. That's excellent. Pat, how about you? Did you think it worked as a mystery?
Yes, I did. I have to agree that I feel like the fantasy covered for the mystery. When I was first started reading it, had it in my head. I was like, oh, it's Victor. Like obviously, like it's the missing piece. Like it's gonna be one of those. And about halfway through, I was convinced that like, okay, so it's obviously voodoo, and the drugs are maybe being produced by like, where does voodoo come from? Could it be like some like a Jamaican sect of dark magic users or something? And completely like gas myself up to thinking there's this whole extra level of plot that I somehow missed. And then it came right back around to Victor, and I wasn't upset. I was just like, oh, I knew that. I wasn't excited for more magic or anything. Yeah, I had a great time. There was towards the end, I was wondering if I had missed something or if it did go over my head, but I feel like it tied all together. It all together tied well in the end, and Victor was fun. It did leave me with some questions about like deeper questions about the magic system, the mystery itself. Like as it's building to this, he's alluding to like, whoever did this is like on another level. And then it's like, oh, when did you start practicing magic, Victor? Oh, 6 months ago, I lost my job. Magic, right? And it's just a little bit like, well, damn, what could a guy with 20 years of study do? Which brings up questions about like the White Council and like what is a wizard really capable of in a mystery story like this?
Okay, man, I am really glad to hear you say that, and I'm going to not spoil anything really deliberately. But what I can definitely tell you is that question about this is some badass doing this. Wait, it's a sorcerer who's just been doing this for a few years? That question is something that people still debate about the book. What I will tell you is that question ties into the background and the meta plot of the series. Okay, so let's just follow up with that. Did you like the pacing? Like, we've read a lot of books that are multi-climax. I think Stormfront actually is a little bit of a multi-climax book. Did you think that he executed that successfully? Did you feel like you had enough buildup and enough of a break between the couple big fight scenes?
I think the pacing actually was very good. I've read a lot of first-time works of fiction or like early writers' fiction, and they tend to overstay their welcome. And I never found that Stormfront overstayed its welcome. It was almost too quick. There are times where I wish he had almost slowed down and extrapolated on like what was happening or what else was going on in the background. knowing there's more books, that's part of the draw to wanting to read more, is that I'm hoping some of those questions will be answered. But overall, I'd rather it be quick than it drag. And it definitely did not drag.
Yeah, well, don't worry. As Jim goes on, his books definitely get longer, but I don't think you're going to have any complaints about that. Okay, so Charlotte, same question to you. How'd you feel about the pacing?
I thought it was really tight. It went by very quickly. They're definitely in the second half, things keep picking up. And I think at one point he mentions that it's only been 3 or 4 days since he's talked to Monica. And even I was like, oh my gosh, wow, you've had a rough weekend, dude. So I didn't feel at any point like I was trying to rush through or get through pages because was it was boring. At no point did I feel like things were boring. Like Patrick, there were definitely moments where I almost had to reread because things were happening so quickly that I needed to make sure that I understood. Wait, hold on. So that the toad creature is back now, and hold on, how many scorpions are we talking about here? So that
Yeah, a lot of scorpions.
turns out it's a lot of scorpions. But I thought the pacing was good, and I got to the end of it and felt like I could have kept reading.
Yeah, awesome. I do agree with you guys that I think Jim's one of his greatest gifts as a writer is his ability to pace out a book. It's really evident that he very quickly understood how a story arc should go, but that it was something that he had to work on to make sure that all of his beats landed exactly the way he wanted it to. One thing that you both sort of hit on is that at certain points you were like, man, I wish there was a little bit more exposition. So one thing I think I can tell you is that the character Bob, Bob the Skull, literally exists because the creative writing professor who he was talking to said, Jim, you just got to make sure that if you're going to try to get this published, the pacing is good. You can't have anybody who's just there to be a talking head and just, dumping exposition. So, of course, what does he do? He, makes a floating skull. But he still uses Bob very sparingly. He doesn't drop a lot of exposition all at once. And one thing I also wanted to note about what you said, Charlotte, was actually when Adam and I started the podcast, one of the first things we did is we have to actually work out the timeline. So we have notes. It's like, okay, so it starts at Thursday. Is it 10 in the morning? Is it 1 p.m.? When does the mail come to this office building? Of us actually trying to go work that out because it is so compressed. One of the things Butcher will tell you about the whole Dresden Files is every story is kind of the weekend of a given year where Harry is caught off guard by something and spends the whole story on his back foot. Eventually, we will hopefully turn you guys loose on the short stories, and in those, you'll get to see examples of Harry actually knowing exactly what to do in a situation because he's a freaking wizard. That leads me to the last question about the overall plot. We've touched on it a little bit already, but did you guys feel like the climax, the ending scene with Victor, was satisfying? I mean this, one, from a dramatic perspective, did you feel like it was sufficient to the demands of the book? But two, from a character perspective, did you feel like for Harry, and to a lesser extent for Victor, that conflict gave you a resolution on the story beats that you were looking into?
Say from a plot perspective, it made sense to me. I enjoyed, you have to have the big confrontation with the big bad evil guy. I liked that he was thrown to his own creations as a way of getting rid of him. I feel like I know earlier on it talked about Victor's motivation and we got a lot of it from Monica, but I still felt like he was a little bit of almost like a cardboard character. Like there wasn't much to Victor beyond, has he been taken over by the thrall of magic? Is he this bad guy? Like we mostly hear about him from the other characters and not so much of him really explaining himself as I might have wanted. I would say that I think Harry came out well in that. I liked that he cleverly used not magic to go after the guy. I thought that him just tackling him was great. That I cheered on. I really enjoyed that bit of it. So narratively, it was satisfying from a character perspective. I'm not sure if I really got enough of who Victor was to feel satisfied with that guy being defeated in such a dramatic way.
Okay, that's awesome. Come back to me in a few books if you like the series and you keep going with this, and we'll have a talk about why Victor might seem like a cardboard cutout by that point of the story. But yes, I think that is actually a very, I think that's a perfect critique of him, actually. Though I do think there's a meta narrative reason for that. Okay. Pat, how about you? Was the climax satisfying dramatically? Was it satisfying from a character perspective?
So I'll take the question as it's given. In terms of a dramatic moment, yes, but I wanted more. I really wanted a Smokin' Aces style bunch of parties at play at the lake house, spells and bullets flying everywhere. So I was, part of my head I was like, where's Bianca? Like, where's her coming back into the story? Where is Murphy's partner? I think it's Murphy's partner. How has he not been tracking Harry after his partner's been stung by a scorpion? Why is there not a SWAT team at this residence? Like, where's the FBI? Like, kind of a whole I expected there to be almost more going on there, at least from Bianca, because she seems so dead set on some kind of vengeance. And honestly, house full of scorpions and fire, two birds, one stone, make it really quick and snappy. But overall, it was good. I enjoyed the application of magic. I enjoyed the personal, and this is kind of bleeding into the character satisfactory. I did enjoy the limits Harry set upon himself. I am a sucker for someone like sitting, actually acknowledging the fact of like, I could just blow up the house. I could just blow up the house. I could just blow up the house. I don't actually have to come to any sort of risk at all. I could just blow up the house. I understand that, he has the essentially a sort of Damocles hanging over his head, the albatross around his neck that is the White Council. And kind of going back to an earlier point, because that's not as it's hinted at and kind of explained of, oh, he's killed before, so they're really on him if he does it again because evil wizards are really bad. But there's an evil wizard in the house, so maybe I don't know, take care of it. You're being tailed by all these people. You, there are cameras. I mean, I guess his technological gremlins kind of handle that angle handily, but it is something where I was satisfied on both parts. I did want a little bit more from each.
Okay, so Patrick, just one moment before I respond to anything you said, I just have to say something to the listeners briefly. Nobody tell him! Nobody tell him! All right, cool. So I just had to get that out of the way. The FBI will be in the next book, so good job predicting that. You'll see them. Anyway, so I actually really like the critique that it's sort of a letdown from a pure fireworks perspective, because I remember feeling the same thing. When Harry kicks in the door of the varsity, blows it up with a spell, and then throws a fireball at the jukes box, I'm like, oh man, okay, now I get it. That's the first moment in me for the book where it's like, oh yeah, he's a wizard, like Dungeons and Dragons cast fireball wizard. Yeah. And
has at least 6 level spell slots.
Exactly.
At least a few.
And when we get to the ending, scene, it's like you throw a film canister to break the circle. First of all, it's cool that you thought about why you shouldn't use a spell. And I agree that in general, the fact that Harry is genre savvy is an attractive thing about the books. But I expected there to be more, lightning bolts and stuff. And I think that it's very satisfying in retrospect that Butcher gives himself room to grow in climaxes. But I also think it's a deliberate choice to ground a lot of the climactic moments in the books in really simple to understand dramas that you could see, as a Mexican standoff at the end of just a Hollywood film. I think that is a deliberate choice. So keep track of that as you continue to read. Tell me if that's working for you or if you'd like it to devolve into a little bit more high fantasy stuff.
It did just strike me now that I think about it, when he gets his hair taken, when he gets hit and taken his hair, he seems like he blows open the door to the club. But he seems ready in that moment to have magic solve his problems at that time, right? He kicks in the door, he throws the fireball at the juice box. That's, like you said, you're expecting the lightning bolt towards the guy. because he's like, he has my hair, he can use that hair to do whatever he needs to do. This is a terrifying prospect to him, so he's willing to kind of go and do whatever he needs to do. And then when he gets to the house, he has to have a sit down for like, 30, 40 seconds being like, is it okay to kill? Should I kill him? Should I not? When before, when your life was in danger, you were ready just from pull the ripcord, let's go, we'll figure it out later.
Yeah, Harry definitely, I think he feels genuine to me to a certain extent, because sometimes his emotions do just override his better nature. He's not always thinking things through when he's upset or scared. So, Pat, jumping off of that discussion of Dresden as a character, what do you think his biggest strengths are? And you can answer that either from Dresden as a character, what do I think is, his like highest stats, or you can answer it from a Dresden as a protagonist. What do I think Butcher has done the most right there?
I think Harry's knowledge in universe is probably his biggest strength. His ability to commune with the fairy, his ability to, I'm going to need some silver with the vampire. I'm going to need, a couple of different things to handle this. Like, it reminded me of a sense of the Witcher series of books, and also the games as well, where every fight is a preparation. How well you know what you're going after and how well you prepare is your greatest strength, beyond the grace and speed and strength. It's the mind, it's the mental quickness, it's the, alacrity to, in a situation, you have multiple options. What option will you use? What options do you want to save? Because there may be a bigger threat. So I would say how he's written and his, his application and willing to use in universe knowledge, and also a little bit of, the genre savvy nature of a noir novel and fantasy novel.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And Harry will actually say, either he said it in this book or he will say it in the future, that that's what a wizard is. Being a wizard is all about preparation. That's what makes them actually scary.
I think it is this book.
Yeah. Okay. So Charlotte, turn it over to you. And again, in terms of from a character or from a, protagonist perspective, what are Harry's biggest strengths?
Yeah, so I will take this. I think they're a little combined, the character versus protagonist. I think how he thinks on his feet is my favorite thing about him. So he's not prepared for hardly anything that happens to him, as in there's a lot that he does not expect to happen to him in this book, and so his reactions to it, either using things that he's prepared beforehand or just improvising to get out of a situation, that to me was the most exciting thing about him. I say that's kind of combined with him as a protagonist because, I mean, if you're an author, it's a little bit easier to write somebody who can think on their feet when you are writing it and not actually coming up with things ad hoc. But I thought that was very well done. It did seem genuine. It felt grounded, the way that he was coming up with things on the fly, as well as, like Pat was saying, like pulling from what he knows in it. It didn't feel super Deus Ex Machina, that he was pulling things from the wind or whatever else was going on from his background knowledge as a wizard. So I did really like that. The other thing I liked, and you can tell that it is a narrative device, but it was one that I enjoyed and thought was well executed, was Harry's sight. So when he can look at characters and learn a little bit about them, I thought that was a really great way to add almost an omniscience to the characterization, to give a little bit more flavor to the characters that he's encountered without having to have, an omniscient narrator for things. So that I thought was really a nice choice for the protagonist, so that we could learn more about the people that he is encountering, that he can read them by looking at them. And so I thought that was really well used when he first meets Marconi, because he's had no reason to know this guy. We could just be hearing background things or getting exposition from other characters, but to have Harry encounter him and to hear his perspective of, oh, this is like a cool, calculated, color of money dude, that I thought was very well done. So to me, those were the biggest strengths of the character, was just his improvisation and pulling things that did actually feel like not improvised, but not super hokey, and then the getting insight about the other characters.
First of all, I think the improvisation is absolutely true. It is a Dresden trademark. He is a Harrison Ford protagonist. He's a scoundrel a little bit. He can think on his feet for sure. But beyond that, he is a wizard. And that capability of wizards to use soul gazes or the sight, and they're interrelated concepts, to look at either a place or a person or somebody's interior. Like exactly what you said, in a first-person perspective novel, the fact that he tells you everything the sight shows you is true, everything you see in a soul gaze is true, you can take this to the bank, it's so important. Because you guys will find out, Harry is not exactly an unreliable narrator in the sense that he's deliberately telling you falsehoods, but Butcher has talked about the fact that Harry has a very limited perspective, and he can't always see everything about an event that happens to him because he doesn't know enough to see it. But whenever Dresden does a soul gaze or uses the sight, that is the author giving you in, black pen, this is real and true, and he's not misunderstanding anything. And you're absolutely right. It was something that really attracted me to the book, that he used magic not just as fireballs or big location spells or making people's hearts explode. He was turning little folklore things, like the eyes are the windows to the soul, into a deep magical idea about truth as a metaphor for what magic really is. It's an expression of underlying truths. Okay, not to continue pontificating about the magic system, which, God, I do enough on the regular episodes. But I just want to follow this up by, so Dresden's a D&D character. What's his best stat? What's his worst stat? Charlotte, you go first.
Yeah, okay. I feel like his wisdom is really low. Maybe that's
Fair.
Unfair, but that's
Fair.
where I came from at the beginning. Just some of his instincts are not great. And then highest strength, I mean, classic wizard, like high intelligence, right? That he does have the ability to pull from all of these different areas, bring his knowledge in, even if it means cheating. Like he does have Bob. He has the literal talking head that is telling him spells or, potions and things like that. But I don't know. He's like the really bad student that just managed to be a really good test taker or really good at studying and uses that to get along, like myself. Honestly, that was not pointed, Brian, I promise you. So that's kind of where
a little bit on the nose. I can vouch for that.
Forgot who I was talking to for a second.
That's fine.
So
go on, pop off, Queen.
So that to me was but low wisdom in a lot of those senses. Like he is very driven by his emotions in some of those scenes, also in his improvisation of his the scale of his response often seems puzzling, to say the least.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because in D&D, of course, what makes you a good investigator? Being perceptive, and that's what wisdom governs. But I think you're correct, because I think a lot of fans would say that Harry, despite being a good investigator who, in perception is governed by the wisdom stat, he is not wise in the sense of his ability to weigh his actions and plan in advance the dilemmas he's going to face. But he is smart in terms of how he reacts to them and his ability to actually seek things out. So that's interesting. Charlotte, one thing that I wanted to ask you about specifically, because I know you've read Stephen King, you got through that scene in It that we're not going to mention, but in the book, Murphy literally calls Dresden a chauvinist. So do you think that is warranted as a character flaw? And I want to point out that criticism that Dresden is a chauvinist is one that readers will make about this series. It's not one that people levy at Butcher's other work. So with that in mind, do you think that is a flaw of Dresden?
So it's interesting because it almost feels like a cop-out for someone in the novel to call him a chauvinist, because just because you're pointing out the behavior doesn't mean that it's acceptable to then have it continue throughout. And I was not super thrilled with the way that he was treating women in that book, or frankly, the way that women were treating him. Like his characterization of those female characters, that's not Dresden's reaction to them. That is every single woman that he encounters wants to have a sexual relationship with him, besides the grieving soon to be widow. So to me, that feels like cheating to say, oh, well, it's because I've written this character to be chauvinistic. But you, I think, also have some problematic, although I don't typically like using that word. I think you've got some stuff going on with how you write women.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair. I think it shows in this book that Butcher is a 25-year-old at the University of Oklahoma who grew up in a family that, put the fun in fundamentalist and is breaking away from that at this point in his life. So
See, now that's helpful context because, Brian, I did absolutely no background research on this. I did not Google, I did not read any Wikipedia, but definitely knowing that this is written by a 25-year-old, and what I did look up when it was written in 2000. So I am willing to give a little bit of slack for that type of stuff because it doesn't really detract from the story all that much. It doesn't detract from those characters being still interesting and his conversations with them being interesting and fun to read. But the part where Murphy does just flat out call him a chauvinist, that was the part where I was like, okay, but hang on, that's not how you can just get out of the way that you're kind of writing off women in this story.
yeah, just because a character is going to call you out on it doesn't mean that you, the author, can then carte blanche, have him do whatever you want him to do as a narrative device, right? So, Pat, same question to you. What do you think Dresden's biggest weaknesses or flaws are?
I would say Harry's flaw, which is weird because before I talked about how he's so prepared, but he's also remarkably like not willing to grapple with the practical danger. He's so focused on like the magic of it all that like a dude with a bat completely just knocks him, right? And like and that's like as a person, I was like, the guy literally pulled you into his car and said, "You're gonna have a bad day," and like you continue on this path, you're going to like random airports to meet with random strangers. No, you're not thinking of anyone tracking your movements. You're not trying to hide your route. You're taking the same way home. Like, just like practical skills of like evasion. Like, as an investigator, you should be able to tail someone beyond magical means. And I feel like he, as a character, has no concept of counter surveillance.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And one thing that I will say is that Dresden grows as a character in a lot of different ways throughout the series. And you start the series meeting him when he's 25 and pretty much fresh off a farm in the Ozarks. He actually has worked as an apprentice private investigator for at least a couple years before the events of Stormfront, but he's out on his own fairly recently. So I think it is his tradecraft valid critique. It's not as good in Stormfront as it should be from your hard-boiled novel protagonist, and that's definitely a weakness of his. I think Harry would frankly agree with that at this point. I also think that I had the same reaction to you when I read Stormfront for the first time, where I thought, not having seen anybody else's reactions, oh, this guy's clearly overdoing the whole a drop dead gorgeous dame walked in, kind of like thing. And I thought that it was actually it was very sort of genre savvy from the author's perspective to say, well, if I actually made that character, like if I made a person who had a day-to-day like that in a book in the modern day, people would think he was completely absurd as an individual. People would just think that he's ridiculous. And that's how a lot of people do react to him. So I thought that was a good choice, or not a good choice, but I thought that was a reasonable way to write noir fiction in a modern setting. But I also think that if I had felt like nothing changed ever in the series, I don't think I would have stuck with it.
The thought occurred to me, the book's written in the early 2000s, and having gone through the pop culture phase, there is a very fine line between Dresden, like private investigator, and Dresden, I studied the blade.
Mm-hmm.
It is a little like, it did strike me when I was reading where I was like, huh, you know magic. and you're wearing your duster everywhere, and you feel good about this.
It's definitely obvious that Dresden is a character from before all that was memified.
Yes, yeah, and
For
or like
sure.
right on the cusp where like this is very much like perhaps written of like in the echo chamber of like an online board that no longer exists, and like
Hmm.
was like, oh yeah, like an investigator would have this, and he would have this, and they would have this, and they would be so cool, and no one would understand, and it's and like. Again, I don't know if that was the intent or where his head was at, but it did strike me that there's a little like there's a line there, and I don't know how many times we go over it, and it may be more like a scribble.
I think Pat is really picking up on something where it's really hard to put myself in a mindset of what the world was like before the pickup artist, and that really is what strikes me. One of the things that was bumping up to me narratively that I think made it a weak choice is this is a dude that's walking around with like dirty hair and sweatpants, and like you said, like like a black duster. And yet all of these women are super attracted to him. That I don't buy. That did not make sense to me. And so there is very much a, oh, well, but he's like Neo from the Matrix. And so, of course, like women are good. It does very much speak to an immaturity about how men and women interact with each other. And I will also say, narratively, for a guy who says several times that, oh, well, I have a lot of trouble getting dates, like he's got all these attractive women that are trying to get with him. So that to me also, I think, was a weakness in the writing of this character that makes him being a chauvinist kind of feel like a cop out to me, that it's more a weakness of the authors.
I just want to ask you a question, Charlotte, because you said this a couple times, and I'm not saying you're incorrect. I want to just know. You say all of these women who are interested in him. Let's put Susan aside. Who else are you saying is interested in Harry?
Who was I? Or maybe I was not reading that correctly. Now I'm second guessing myself. He appears to be having a flirtatious thing with Murphy in at least one time, right? Am I making that up? Maybe it's all just in Harry's mind and I'm reading it. So you bringing that question to me does make me now think that perhaps I am taking Harry's perspective literally, that these women are interested in him rather than seeing through that they're just being there, because I thought that he had had a flirtatious thing with Murphy. And I think there was one, I think it was Linda too. But again, maybe I misinterpreted that. I don't know.
I'm not saying that you misinterpreted anything. I was just curious because the way the story is written, I think, leaves that open to interpretation. And I don't think necessarily every reader would say that or wouldn't. And I think it's interesting to track how you perceive Harry is relating to the characters around him in general.
Yeah, I mean, I think Linda is definitely presenting as someone, and apparently lives as someone who, uses sex as a means of connection and sex as a means of communication. But that doesn't mean like there's not a flirtatious attitude at play between her and Dresden. During the phone calls when he's concussed and Murphy's over and she's like, "Oh, I'll come to your place." And we'll like, I don't want to. It's not that they're throwing themselves at him. It's more written as like, oh, Murphy's over, like taking care of him after he's concussed, and he also has a date with Susan, and then Linda wants to come over, and the prom's tomorrow, and it's like all these women and so many choices, and what if they meet? It's like you could just have a conversation. You could just explain like, hey, I'm concussed, or I'm clearly in bad shape. This person is like, I'm a consultant for them and I collapsed in their office. I did have a date and this is part of my job. He's hyping it up to be this like, oh, what if they meet? It'll be terrible. It's really not that big of a deal.
You are quoting me from our review of that chapter. Yeah. Adam as well. Anyway, Pat, did you overall, though, like him as a protagonist? Did you want to see him succeed?
Yeah. And that's the thing is, just in spite of that or despite that, I did enjoy him as a person. I never got the feeling that, Harry's a bad guy, right? I never got the feeling that he's, does he have some blind spots? Maybe. I don't know if that's how he's written or if it's like a facet of the author from, first book and background experiences. But overall, the character was, fun. And, I enjoyed seeing them struggle and I enjoyed seeing them succeed.
Charlotte, how about you? Did you like him as a protagonist and did you want to see him succeed?
despite the negativity I just expressed, I really did like Harry. I think he is a fun character. I think he is compelling in the way that he approaches problems. He seems to have, a moral sense of how magic should be used and right and wrong, and a soft spot for these characters that he gets to know. I enjoyed the relationships that he had with Mac the bartender and with Bob and the repartee that he had. So yeah, I want to see him succeed, and I enjoyed spending time with him and want to see where he goes next.
Yeah, I think that that's one of the really great things about Butcher's writing. Harry is a complicated character. He's not all good. And I don't just mean, maybe he's evil in certain respects. I mean, in some ways, he's not my ideal protagonist, but Butcher does make him likable beside that. And he feels, to a certain extent to me, very real because he is somebody who I can see existing in the year 2000 as an imperfect 25-year-old man.
Yes, it just occurred to me, another piece of media that I meant to compare this to at the beginning, in contrast to Harry. So Jessica Jones, very clearly also an homage to the noir genre. She is cool. She can pull off the leather jacket, and she also, Pat, to your point, has very good investigative skills, not just her super strength. So I would say that she is, if you're thinking of the cool version of this character, Jessica Jones as a wizard, that is not what Harry Dresden is capturing.
Yeah, I agree with you, honestly. And hold that thought, because I think that you will meet characters who give off that vibe more strongly in the future. And I think it's one of the reasons why Harry manages to be a likable protagonist, if you feel that he is because if he were cool, if he was doing all of this and it was part of the plan, then dude, you're kind of an asshole. And we forgive him for kind of being a dick sometimes because he doesn't know what he's doing. You're kind of you're bumbling around.
I was just gonna say he doesn't mean it. It goes back. That's the sexism thing too. You do forgive him for it because, well, I don't think it's intentionally malice. He's just kind of silly.
Sorry, and this might offend 2 to 3 guests on here. He reminds me of someone who didn't go to a co-ed high school.
Wow.
Ouch.
Burn.
Thanks a lot.
No, but he's kind of like, he doesn't.
But also, yes,
he doesn't fully have coming into the game a little bit late and doesn't fully have a grasp on not social norms, but the best way to approach someone, or what is considered too much, too little, it kind of like a how to avoid being an asshole crash course. And I don't know, maybe that's less true, and I just wanted to get a dig at 2 people that I've known for a while.
I want to break in because one of my favorite captions on any picture of Jim Butcher that I've ever seen is Jim Butcher looks like someone who reads Jim Butcher books.
Yeah.
And I think that does apply to Harry.
Yeah.
Harry looks like someone who reads the Dresden Files book.
I got the sense of a lot of enforced, grew up with, or maybe not grew up, but grew up around people who enforced, no, dude, this is completely normal. Obviously this is cool. And it's oh, you could have done with more of an upbringing.
Okay, so let's talk about some other characters in the book. Pat, you're starting this one. So were there other characters who really stood out to you where you were like, wow, this one's really well done or really poorly done?
I don't know if I have an answer of well done or poorly done. I have 2 answers for who I wanted to see more of, and that is Marcone and Bianca. I feel like Bianca got an incredible setup and a decent interaction, and then silence and nothing, and I really wanted more, because it seems like there was a mutual trepidation between wizards and vampires of they are both incredibly capable, I don't want to say creatures, but facets of this magical world, and you get a little bit of that in their confrontation, which kind of goes back to an earlier point of, as soon as the glamour drops, she's evil, and then she's wounded when it's back on, and whole thing maybe another time. And Marcone was interesting because of the soul window, right? The idea that he sets up this power as ultimately the truth, it is you can take this as empirical, what you see. I am a sucker for characters that are, I don't want to say one note, but are masks of anger or pain. And I would have loved to see, not only like what happened either to make you this way, or how do you get to a point in your life where you've dealt with enough wizards that is your default.
All of these are great questions and points. Charlotte, what characters stood out to you?
It's not fair that Pat got to go first on that one because those were the exact characters I was going to pick. But I did also think of, I really liked Murphy and Carmichael, and I want to see more of Carmichael, actually, somebody who is very skeptical of Harry, even though he's had interactions with him in the past. I enjoy that dynamic in these types of. I want to hear more from the non-believer and see how he reacts and see also if Harry can win him over, because if he continues to actually be effective, can he actually get the skeptic to be on his side? I liked their Mulder and Scully dynamic. I like even though Murphy was also trepidatious at times with dealing with Harry, but that those two characters I think were fun and I want to see more of.
I'm really glad to hear you say that, because actually what our last episode was partially about was exactly what you discussed. Can Harry win over someone who's somewhat skeptical like Carmichael? So I think you also partially answered this question in that discussion, Charlotte, but turning this over to you, because Patrick jumped here, are there any other characters that you hope to see return, or do you want to expand on why you want to see any of the characters you mentioned?
Some of the other supernatural characters I hope become part of the broader world. So definitely Bob the Skull. That was great. I really enjoy Bob. I can only imagine that he is going to be part of the future of the series. Morgan as well, because I thought in this book it was definitely a facade with a lot going on behind the scenes, especially with the White Council that we haven't heard of. And it seems like he and Harry have a lot of history, and I want to learn about that history.
Okay, so let's talk about some individual and specific characters. Somebody who we haven't mentioned at all is Susan. How did you guys feel about Susan as a character, her role in the story? What'd you think about her?
So Susan also reminded me of a journalist in another piece of media, which is Freddie Lounds in Hannibal.
Yes, and Freddie Lounds, you mean in the Mads Mikkelsen TV series Hannibal?
Yes, in the series Hannibal, not yes. So I found her to be very Freddie Lounds-esque in that she's hard scrabble, using her feminine wiles, whatever she can to get a story, but then also, to your point, some of her actions don't really make sense and don't seem like it would really get to the outcome that you need. And also, is she actually going on it? That the ambiguity of whether or not she's actually interested in Harry, I think makes sense and is kind of interesting to me. But I thought that she was a little bit weak as a character. I just thought she was a little bit too tropey. I know that part of this whole book is an homage to the noir, but she very much felt like the hard scrabble journalist without much else going on behind, sort of being a plot device more than anything.
I liked Susan. I do kind of, hitting on what Charlotte said, I do have the issue where she was kind of tropey, but I went in a different direction with it, where I kind of saw, Superman, the Adventures of Superman, the animated series, like DCAU, like late 90s, early 2000s, Lois Lane, where like this
Sure.
is someone who's given as like competent and capable and like driven towards their story, but also is like, despite all their competence, or maybe, because of it, they're generally used as a plot device. I would like to see more of her. I do believe that she is a true believer. Like the scene in the bar when she's talking to him, it doesn't seem like she's belittling him. It doesn't seem like she's like, needling him just to like, oh, I gotta make rent. Let's go pick on Dresden and like, get a story. It does seem like she's a true believer, but it also seems like, this is a reporter who then like someone who believes in demons, who then when facing the demon pulls a gun. And it's like, well, if you believe this, why are you trying to shoot it? Like maybe fight, flight, or freeze. I don't know. Like people do crazy things when they're confronted with stress and the threat, but it was a little bit like tough as nails reporter, falls victim to which potion is a kind of like, yeah. I like her. I want her to do more beyond being kind of a plot device.
So at the end of every episode of Recorded Neutral Territory, Adam and I ask a question of the listeners that is about something we just discussed or something that we're about to discuss on the program to get their takes on it. And one of the first ones we asked was if Monica Sells is at all morally culpable for the people who die or are hurt as a result of the actions that Victor takes. So I'm actually going to give you, I think, what is a fair reflection of Adam and my answer at the end of this. So, Pat, do you think Monica is at all morally culpable?
Yes, in terms of like putting Harry into it, but I also think based on the interaction at the end and the interaction with her daughter when Harry's leaving, that she was kind of hoping that this would come about. I think she's a woman looking for someone to help her and has no hope that anyone will. Do I think she's morally culpable for what happens before? No, because your husband's now an evil wizard who can like set you on fire with his mind or like summon 100 scorpions. Like that's duress. Like we don't typically charge people who are like, forced to drive a getaway car the same as the people holding the gun to their head. But morally culpable for getting Harry involved, yes. But I do wonder if that was like her Hail Mary.
Sure. Charlotte, how about you?
Yeah, I can sympathize with Monica and why she doesn't more directly confront Victor. That is definitely one scary dude. Again, I can't stress enough how many scorpions there were. And also, the fact that he's too many scorpions and that he's threatened their children, that they're involved. So I think that she is culpable for getting Harry in, but like Pat said, it's a Hail Mary. I think that that's actually the best thing that she did, right? Is that she tried to reach out to somebody who might be able to do things in whatever way she was able to. Again, she was not honest with him, and I think that she probably could have given him a little bit more of a heads up as to what was going on without directly putting herself in danger. But I could see her being so wary of doing that, not necessarily knowing the limits of Victor's power. Like, what if he had told her that he was like spying on her or could see her every move? You could totally see that. I mean, the third eye allows you to see so much that I think that the fact that she reached out at all to me gives her a little bit more of, gives me more sympathy for her. It gives me more sympathy for her that she did come forward to do something, even if that thing was not perfect and took a little bit of time to figure out how to stop that guy.
Yeah, I think that you guys generally agree with our take on it. We, I think, stuck out the position that Monica is culpable in the sense that she's literally a member of a criminal conspiracy and doesn't, go to the police. Obviously for understandable reasons, but like literally she is. And two, if you're going to take the risk to go to Harry in the first place and magic is real, then level with him. And if you do that, then there's a much better chance that your husband is not going to kill your children. But we ultimately thought that she redeems herself of any culpability she has because, one, she is trying to solve the situation. And two, what do we find out about her at the end of the book? She's in witness protection. Presumably she's working to dismantle whatever might be left of the 3i drug ring, and she's actively attempting to, help fix the situation. So like literally from a legal perspective, she would be culpable in the sense of you could charge her with a criminal act. Duress would be a defense to that, but she wouldn't ultimately go to prison for it given the redemptive actions that she took from a legal perspective. Okay, so I just really want to quickly talk about, are there any characters who you wanted to put a bet down on what their future would be like with Harry? Arch enemies, frenemies, allies, romantic, interests? Is there anybody you met who you're like, I want to make a guess that this is what's going to happen with these characters moving forward?
I feel like Carmichael's going to have like the skeptic's fall, or skeptic no longer trope happen at some point. Right? Like eventually he's obviously like, I don't think he's going to like Harry, but I think he's going to come to a point where like denying this is now like stupid, right? And I think that'll do like the frenemies kind of thing with him. I hope he doesn't have a romantic interest with Murphy. I feel like it's already there, but I really hope it doesn't go any further because I like them as more of a strictly business thing going forward. or at least like friendly, but like very clearly we live in two different worlds or our priorities are very different people. Arch enemies, Bianca. God, I hope so. And I feel like we already kind of got the frenemies with Marconi, so maybe that.
Charlotte, how about you?
Yeah, I think frenemies with Marconi. I just can't see Marconi letting go of the fact that he has a real life wizard now that he knows and can call upon to be on his side for potentially. That's kind of, I could totally see that as being the next thing of, well, now my next client is Marconi. Uh but we'll see if that prediction comes true or not. I want to see more Toot Toot. I want to see that pixie again. That
Oh,
guy, that I want that pizza eating pixie. I know that was, we haven't really talked about that yet. And perhaps his arc has been closed up because now he has his pizza. But I want to see Harry call upon the pixies more.
And just for the Pixies, what did you think about that? Did you find it funny? Was it purely charming? Did you think Toot Toot was a total idiot? Or, where were you on that?
So the magic system is so grounded that I did like these nods to the more supernatural and the little bit hiding behind the surface, like all of the insanity that can come along with magic. So the demon, the vampires, and so just the idea that there are fairies in the world. I think at one point Harry mentions, I tried to highlight the times that Harry mentioned something that I could see as being like a future backstory. I think he mentions he has a fairy godmother.
He certainly
So
does, yes.
so I think that building out that part of the lore would be very fun because I just thought that it was a fun series of rules written about how you have to summon the fairies and what they're able to do. Like that scaffolding for that character was very fun for me.
the Pixies, I mean, obviously the vampires are coming back. Like that is going to happen. Like you don't put that Chekhov's gun on the mantle and be like, vampires. Anyway, and then move on. I assume like we're going to get more magic. I assume if there's vampires, following the underworld principle, there are werewolves. They're likely at war. If there's, there are fairies, I mean, if there's fae, are we going to get Seelie and Unseelie? We already have a pretty big Irish kind of like influence in Chicago.
Yeah, so I just want to take huge swings so that you can put them in the podcast and have it
Love it.
be completely wrong so all of your listeners can feel super smart that they've read these books and
That's
I
cool too.
haven't yet. So I don't think so I think that Victor Sells actually had power behind him and was being put forward because we wanted Third Eye on the streets of Chicago and that there's something going on with that. I definitely don't think this is the last we're going to see of that drug. I think that Victor was a patsy, and there's a whole other layer of this that we didn't get in this book. So that's my one wild prediction. And then the other thing is, I do want to hear more about Harry's like upbringing, and I'm looking now back at my highlights of like, ooh, that could be a future story. And what happened with his master, that I feel like is going to play in somehow in the future of who that guy was, because he mentions it several times. And also like him being marked, all of that stuff, I definitely want to hear a lot more about.
Pat, what next?
My big swing. Victor's coming back. Necromancy is going to be a thing, and Monica's going to die. She's going to come back and she's going to die, and I think Victor is coming back as well. I feel like either, like Charlotte mentioned, that he's a patsy for power, and that maybe in a sense, like his power and like ability to grasp magic is useful, and he's an investment. But I think he's coming back through some form of necromancy, and I think that Monica will be back as well.
Listeners, do you hear this guy thinking that there's going to be future books that involve necromancy? Crazy, right? Okay. So let's talk about magic and the supernatural a little bit more. Charlotte, I want to throw this to you first. What'd you think about the magic system through the Winds of Stormfront?
I liked it. It's a crunchy magic system, as in crunchy like homegrown sort of. I liked that it feels a little bit driven almost like emotionally. I mean it is driven emotionally. I like that it's driven by what's going on with you. I like the types of spells that are able to be done on the fly versus the things that take a lot of preparation. I'm always interested in a story like this of the scalability of the magic or the scalability of a system. And so Harry very clearly for us sets the ceiling of you can't kill another person with magic like that, it like legally with the White Council, quote unquote. But then he also kind of sets it as like, this takes incredibly powerful magic. You have to harness the power of the storms itself to be able to do something like this, to kill two people, ripping out their hearts that way. So he's really set a ceiling for the capability of this magic system, or at least has appeared to. So I'm curious, if we're getting a lot more books, how you can up the stakes when you've already done that, what other sorts of tools or sources of power you can tap into to do bigger and better things, because any book series always has to try and up the ante. And it does strike me almost as a narrative challenge when in your very first book you set, this is incredibly powerful magic to kill these two people, something that I am probably not capable of without killing myself. Like, that's the way the energy of this system works. To set that in stone at the beginning, I could see that being challenging to work around or to overcome in an interesting way. It could be, I'm curious to see how you get around that and still have interesting stakes.
Pat, how about you? How'd you think about the magic system?
So, Brian, you and I have had long conversations about magic systems in different forms of media. Like, that is... Yeah. I liked it. I want more, right? That's really my big takeaway of this, because like Charlotte said, it seemed like there are a lot of limits, but there's also a lot of potential. Like, there's the interior like magic that you cast from like your own, like, is it a reserve? Is it emotion? Like, what do you pull from? Like, is it ritual? But then you can also draw from like the natural order. You can draw from others. There's blood magic, which is always a classic. We love blood magic. What it really left me with is at the end of the book, I was kind of left feeling that I don't really know the rules. I don't think they give the rules fully in the system. It kind of seems like you can get away with it so long as you have the energy to power it, and the energy being like you need to draw from something primordial, which is great, and I want to see more of it. But like, where's the clairvoyance, right? Like, how is there no scrying spell in any of this, coming? Where's the chronomancy, the most powerful form of magic? It's of course chronomancy. It seems like if you can send a demon to a location, astrally project, is there an astral dimension that like you can hunt someone through or go through? I want to see more. Like, we got a lot of evocation, we got a little bit of blood magic, we got some summoning. I want more schools of magic, and I want more rules, and I want someone to break them in half.
So one thing I want to differentiate here, because you don't know either of them at this point, but there are both laws of magic and rules of magic, right? Sure. There's like the
rules are construct, laws are set in stone.
Well, no, the rules are like thermodynamics. Like, it is not possible to do this. As a rule, magic can't do this. The laws are you will be prosecuted. And things that are against the law are possible. Things that are against the rules are, as far as we know, not possible. You haven't gotten a good picture of either of them yet. But the other point I want to make about what you're hitting on in terms of the system is twofold. One, I promise you, Butcher has read a lot of books and works that have magic systems in, and his take is really nuanced. You will see a lot of stuff. There's nothing that is in the popular conception of what magic can do that he hasn't had a passing thought about whether it's possible in his series. But another thing I want to mention is that I think the Dresden Files magic system has something in common with, and you might find this odd, Pat, it has something in common with both Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones, because the magic is never systematized in the sense that, the absolutely crunchiest, not the homegrown way, but the numbers way, crunchiest authors on the planet will do in their books. But it's also not, Harry Potter, whatever the plot demands, ad hoc, there's no consistency. It is intuitive. Like when, depending whether you're watching the movie or reading the book, Arwen or Elrond drops the water hammer on the Nazgul, you're like, hell yeah, that's exactly what I expect rad elves to be able to do. I get it. It's not like somebody sits down and says, so this is how you cast a spell. But you're like, Yeah, man, in this universe with these stakes, this character feels like he should be able to do something like this. And the way this character continues to operate seems consistent to me. If you told me what he did last book, what he does this book makes sense. I think that's the best thing I can say about the magic system. And I just want to say that because I want you to think about whether you agree with that as you read it. Because not everybody agrees with my take on the magic system being that intuitive. Some people actually think it's quite crunchy. So we covered a little bit of this already, but are there any supernatural or magical tropes that you haven't mentioned that you do hope to see Dresden encounter in the future?
I assume there'll be a dragon because there's always a dragon. There's going to be a dragon in Chicago. I know there's a dragon in Chicago. There's going to be a dragon in Chicago.
Who says there'll only be one?
Right. Well, I know I will see at least a dragon. Right. I'm not saying there will be more. I'm just saying there will definitely not be 0 dragons. I feel like we're going to see more magic systems. Or I hope we're going to see more magic systems. Maybe not different systems or different schools of magic. I want to see, we got a good taste of it with Victor, of someone who is, not following the laws and the rules. But I want to see someone who is good at that. I want to see your fully fledged dark wizard. I want to see a Crimson King. I want to see someone who is like, they have understood the truths of the world, and in doing so, they feel that the world is not worth saving. Like, I want to see that level of like burn it down or impose order upon something that is ultimately chaos.
Adam's shaking his head because he can't think of any characters like that in the series. So sorry, Pat.
No, listen.
Charlotte, how about you?
So one trope that we did see that I thought was delightful, the flying broom, I thought that was fun, that got incorporated in there. We hadn't mentioned it yet.
Little Fantasia, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That actually was the first thing to come to mind of like, what is there in Fantasia that we haven't seen yet? I mean, so the duster is basically the magic robe. So I guess we've got that. We've got a skull in his lair. So we've got skeletons. I do think I liked the potions. I want to see more cauldrons. I want to see a dungeon. I think that's what we're missing. I want to see a dungeon, and I want to see Victor's little thing kind of got to it, but I want to see like cultists, like an actual cult underground in Chicago that is, simmering beneath the surface. I always love a good magical conspiracy.
So when you say dungeon, do you mean you want to see a perilous position that people are locked into with little hope of escape? Or are you saying you want to see like some kind of like unknown underground lair where filled with all kinds of supernatural creatures in different little corridors that you could, walk into unsuspectingly?
I want the second one. I want the, you're going through the stone corridors underground trying to get to the MacGuffin at the end. That type of, a little bit of Indiana Jones style in there. That would be satisfying.
Yeah, definitely nothing like that. So sorry, you can be very disappointed, but what can we say? Just can't have everything. All right. So are there any specific spells that you hope to see, or spells that you saw that you hope to see used differently or on a different scale?
Time stop. I want to see time stop. I love chronomancy. I want to see someone do a time stop. I want to see a crime scene happening on a speeding truck that he has to time stop to get some evidence. Give me the plot of Speed, and then it's only the first act. No, I do want to see like chronomancy. I want to see some like really strong, like we already got a lot of like good evocation. I'd like to see like a dedicated magic duel. There's something that I really like in Warhammer Fantasy. They have a College of Magic there, and they have a dueling chamber set up that's completely made out of obsidian, so it dampens the magic of like really strong magic users, so they don't kill each other. And I would love to see something like that. I would love to see like, what does wizard combat look like when you're not trying to kill the person in this world? Because you can't use magic to kill. It's one of the few things that we are told that is you can't do it. So what does that look like when, what is their, I hate to use a Harry Potter reference, but what is their defense against the dark arts class? Like, what does that look like?
Charlotte, anything on the magic side that you saw, want to see differently, or just hope to see?
Yeah, so not a specific spell, but I would like to learn a little bit more about how one becomes a wizard. I think Harry was talking a little bit. I keep going back to Harry's backstory, but I love a good backstory. I'm not saying, listen, I don't want midichlorians. I don't need to know the science of how any of this is happening, but we saw how Victor was learning magic a little bit. I want to know, how did Harry come to get his magic powers? Like, what type of studying do you do? That type of thing. I enjoy that as lore of. I like grounded systems. I want to know that there's at least some logic behind what people are able to do within a system.
I'll say that one thing I really do like about the series in general is that the author, I think, has put a lot of thought into how things would work systematically in his world. And sometimes the answer is just like in our world, not necessarily the way you design it in an ideal white room. So I'll just say that in answer to that hope. Okay. Also about supernatural creatures, talked about this a little bit, but Bianca as a vampire. But did you enjoy the take on vampires that you saw on this?
Yes, I like a scary vampire. I like a vampire that actually will kill you and suck your blood. I think that that is a little bit more true to the type of thing than sexy vampire. So I liked that as soon as we saw Bianca's true form, that she was frankly terrifying. I like that choice.
Pat, how about you? How do you think he did with the vampires?
So the vampires in this, honestly, I'm going to talk about Warhammer Fantasy again, reminded me of that because the vampires in Warhammer Fantasy, typically they're undead and they devote a portion of their magic, because pretty much all vampires are baseline magical beings. They devote a portion of their magic to maintaining a glamour that makes them look, human and seductive. But when a fight, that's the first thing to drop, because you need all the magical power you can get. So I love that depiction. I do like in this that it was less undead and more bat. It kind of reminded me of the incredible Van Helsing film of Hugh Jackman. I forget who plays Dracula in that, but that or even like the Skyrim vampire transformation from Dawnguard. I think it's Dawnguard, when you can transform into a vampire, and it's like this terrifying, not undead, but like creature. This is the creature feature starring the creature. And yeah, I really enjoy that depiction. I like Charlotte. I like scary vampires. I like when scary doesn't mean dead thing walking. I like when scary means no, this is something that should be in a cave.
Yeah, and one thing I want you to track is you mentioned that you liked the glamour of attractiveness, which drops when it's time to throw down. Let me know if you like how that's executed as we get further into the series. Again, not necessarily going to pay off next book, but if we keep going with it, just think about it. Okay, we talked about fairies a little bit before, so we're going to skip the question about whether you like the pixies here. But how about the toad demon? I'm going to preface this by saying, when I think demon, I think, either like Frankenstein, Mary Shelley, it's a daemon, or demon like The Exorcist. Did you guys like the toad demon as a demon? Pat, starting with you.
Love demons being depicted as things that are like the aura is the thing that's threatened, not necessarily the appearance. And with this, it kind of I got the picture of maybe this is showing where my head's at, but almost like Japanese toad, wood print depiction, something that's colorful and maybe a bit oddly proportions, or even this may resonate with some of the audience, Naruto frog sage toad, not really overtly scary, but scary because of this is clearly not normal.
Yeah, fucking weird.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. Charlotte, how about you?
Yeah, I don't know if demon. I'm with you. I hear demon and I think that, first of all, an intelligence, right? And this was more, almost struck me like how I think of trolls in fantasy, really. But the rules around it really felt, like you're summoning a djinn, its name. That aspect of it I thought was really neat. So I did enjoy the demon as that villain. I like that it also narratively, it was satisfying that it came back again at the end. I thought that was well done.
It reminded me a little bit of Brian will know this. I don't know if anybody else will. They're in a series we read growing up, the Mallorean and the Bleegrad. Demon summoning is literally you're pulling like this otherworldly consciousness and forcing it into like something that you find scary. You're crafting the form, and it kind of reminded me of that. Not necessarily because of that system, but because the thing inside, what you put it in, hates you as the summon. Like it does not like that it was summoned, and I think you kind of see that at the end, where as soon as Victor's control over it is broken, it immediately is like turns and stares at Victor because you put me in the body of a toad thing, and I am not pleased.
Yeah, Pat, I will say it's not exactly the same as the Bulgariad. He's not like ripping it off or anything, but hold that thought. It is an interesting comparison. Moving on to the supernatural more broadly, Dresden mentions the never never a couple times at least. Do you guys get a sense of what you felt like that was?
I think it might be like an astral plane potentially, or what actually was coming to mind is like the Feywild something, perhaps like a fully magic world inhabited by magic beings. I could see that that's where the demon's home was, possibly. That was the first thing that came to mind, but I would have no ego whatsoever if I was proven completely incorrect as the series moves on.
So I just want to note an interesting thing for listeners who are not necessarily familiar with D&D, but who are familiar with the books. Charlotte just mentioned the Never Never as a combination of two things. One, the Feywild, the place where the Eldarin, the Archfey live, and two, as a place that you travel through, the astral plane, to get to other destinations and planes. Okay, Pat, how about you? What did you think about the Never Never?
Kind of the same thought as Charlotte in terms of like the Feywild. That was my initial jaunt through it. And I got the idea of, it's the Never Never, maybe something that doesn't exist in our reality, but because it's something that maybe like mortals can't really stay in, right? Like this is either Never Never because like, it's a play on Never Never Land, where it's a whimsy, like fun and fairy, or it's Never Never because like you must never go there, Simba. Like you should not do that.
So guys, Patrick thinks the Never Never is really dangerous in a place that mortals shouldn't necessarily spend time in because it'd be bad for their health. So we'll have to see if that's true, I guess. Anyway, let's talk about the world and lore a little bit. Before we do anything else, I want to just give you guys open season, and you can do this at any point during this conversation also. I promise I will not lie to you, but I will also not answer any questions that I feel like would spoil anything. So do you have any questions for us about the world or the lore, or about something that literally happened in Stormfront and you were like what the fuck is the deal with that?
I think the question that jumped to my mind, and it jumped early and stayed, is it doesn't seem like him and Murphy have gone through necessarily a ton, but it seems like they've gone through a bit. And clearly, like, Dresden has a history with magic, but like there's enough there that, Murphy knows to call them and like go through this whole, you're the consultant. I kind of want to know is, does the background of like how Dresden came to be here get explained? I know we kind of have like, wizard, he's in the only Wizard in the Yellow Page, it's a joke, but like conventionally, like how much of a joke is like magic seen as in the world? Like, is there implicit understanding that like it exists among like the higher levels, or is it like it's completely denied everywhere and very few people know about it? Because it seems like if the Chicago Police Department is like on brand enough to have a magic consultant from this detective, and like the findings of it aren't immediately laughed out as a case, how real, quote unquote, is magic in the world?
So I'm going to give you two answers to this, and I'm going to tell you that they're not complete answers, because certain things that you're touching on here are stuff that Adam and I are speculating about literally 25 years after the book was written. But first, something that you can know canonically is that in the Dresden Files timeline, there is a story involving Harry Dresden and Murphy that takes place before Stormfront, where they meet. And there is a reason why Murphy specifically doesn't think he's full of shit. So there's a story called A Restoration of Faith where Murphy goes, oh, fuck, I guess you are a wizard. And that's why he didn't publish it before Stormfront, but that's why Murphy does actually trust him. The second thing is, what you should consider in the Dresden Files universe is effectively people believe in magic to the same extent as they do in our world, generally. But magic is actually real. So there are certain implications of in our world, presumably, magic is not real. In the Dresden Files universe, though, there's this disconnect between how real magic is and how the universe thinks it is. And I'll tell you right now that this is not fully explained, but you can make some assumptions based on why the world is basically like our world, even though magic is real. And parts of it are explained. Okay, Charlotte, do you have any questions?
So all of my questions are things that I imagine would be spoilers. I just want to know more about...
Throw it out there.
Like Pat, I want to know more about why this is what Harry is doing with his wizarding skill. That to me is very interesting. Is it because he's trying to avoid the White Council? I think you can kind of surmise some of that even just from what happens in this book, that he's a little down on his luck. But given how intelligent and how much skill he has, it is head scratching that this is where he would turn up, I guess.
So one thing I think I can tell you is that having the sword of Damocles hanging over your head is a big deal in the wizard world. So it does make sense that Dresden is not hanging out with a group of the 20 coolest wizards in their special magic club. That's not all there is to it. And a lot of it is about who Harry is. And you get that impression by knowing him long enough, where I feel like it makes perfect sense this is what he's doing. But I feel like that's something that you should be asking yourself, why is this guy doing this? And it's not something that I feel like you do know for certain in the first couple books. Jumping off of that, how good did you find the explanations that you got about the hidden supernatural world in the series? We don't see a lot of them, but for example, we know that Bianca can put on a facsimile of human form, and that's a way that vampires stay hidden. So how good did you find basically the explanations of the hiddenness of the supernatural world, the ones that you got? And in general, how well integrated did you find Butcher's ability to drop lore about the supernatural?
I liked the explanations because this is just the first book. I'm glad that it wasn't just a complete lore dump the entire time of, okay, before I go anywhere, let me tell you my entire system of magic, and these are the materials that I will need. I just feel like that would have driven the plot to a screeching halt. So I did like that it was, oh, I need to use this spell now. Well, this is how I would do it, but without really giving a whole lot of explanation as to why. It's just, obviously I have to pull in my emotions in order to bring up this wind, and this is what this guy's doing. So I did like that it was kind of just thrown in there as he was using it. I'm learning as Harry is doing as to what the magic is capable of. I think probably that that style can only last so long before I'm like, okay, but is that consistent with how you did it the last time? Does that make sense with this scenario? So I think that is just the nature of it being the introductory book, that you can get away with very, very light touch on explaining how this works. And it helps it to feel lived in, right? That, well, Harry's not going to explain it to us every single time. This is his magic. He knows it like the back of his hand. So he just does it intuitively to a certain extent. So that being said, I did like how well integrated it was. I liked that it was limited explanations, but it did leave me wanting more and hopefully expecting there to be more in the future.
Okay, Pat, how about you?
I think I brought up earlier that I do want more explanations, but like Charlotte said, it is the first book. I did appreciate that it kept the plot moving and didn't get bogged down, even though at times I wish it had. I think the explanations were good. I think some of the explanations were kind of explained by him having tech gremlins, which is why his spell book isn't on a computer, which is why he has Bob, and why he's not really good at potions, and how potions are less like chemistry and more like well, you have an idea, you give the right offering, you get the idea, probably. And how magic doesn't seem to be an exact science, even though at times it feels like it very much is. Like with the case of, if you want to explode someone's heart out of their chest, you need to be really precise in what you're doing. Or I would love to get a better sense of the scale. I think going forward is probably the best term I could give it, is, where do things sit on that scale? But other than that, I liked the explanations. I just won.
Yeah, one thing I'll say about that I think is a really good point that you just brought up is that when the actual effect a wizard is trying to produce is very specific, the magic tends to be very specific and have specific requirements. And when it's like, I want to set that thing on fire, well, there's kind of a lot of ways to skin a cat, And I think that the intuitiveness of the, we're trying to do something really key. This takes a huge ritual and a lot of power. And I don't really care how it gets done, but we got to do this, works for me. Because as you were mentioning, Patrick, like potions, it in general works off as a system of what ought to be, what you get for what you put in. And that means that things that are very particular require particularity, and other things don't. Charlotte, I just wanted to say that I think that a cool thing about the series that you might enjoy moving forward is that you are going to get more of those explanations, but it's never going to be like everything. And that continuing mystery dovetails with Harry as a character not knowing everything. Part of the cool thing about having his perspective and not having an omniscient narrator is that we learn what he learns, and therefore there's always something you could be wondering about with regards to the series. It's one of the reasons we have this podcast in the first place. Okay, so I really just want to thank you guys again so much. Obviously, your random friend or family member just telling you, hey, read this book series and appear on a podcast for me is a request that everyone is really free to say no to. And it means a lot to me that you accepted the request, but it means even more to me that you guys did such a great job of actually paying attention to what you were reading to give answers that were honestly really, really good, and not just on point with the questions we asked, but really intelligent in terms of stuff that might happen in the series in the future. So I want to turn it over to you guys for a last word before we get out of here. So Charlotte?
So I'm looking forward to continuing to read this series so I can finally listen to this podcast that I've been hearing about the series. I think that would be really fun to be able to do. And I'm also looking forward to eventually listening to this podcast to hear all of the things I said that were completely incorrect about what is to come in the future, because I can only imagine from some smirks that I saw that there might be more behind what I was saying. No, I was very happy to be able to do this. It was super fun. You guys prepped us very well, and it's a really delightful book. So I was serious at the beginning. I'm looking forward to reading more.
And thank you very much, Charlotte. Patrick, how about you?
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. If your audience enjoyed hearing two neophytes impressions of the series, it's a fun series. I feel that it has a lot of potential to be great. And thanks for putting me onto it. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Please direct any questions or topic suggestions to mac@rnt.fm. That's mac@rnt.fm. Recorded Neutral Territory is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial 4.0.